students who have just time to come to go to school. And also the one class that I don't really think had the sexist and infantilizing quality to it, although maybe slightly infantilizing, was the art class. Because you get a sense that she was the art professor going around and saying, well, did you mean this, did you mean that? And let each student and only one man to 3 women or something represent the self. So that I thought worked best of the, or at least I liked it best.
Christine, did I see your hand?
Oh yeah, I was just going to mention that one of the episodes was focused on the evening division, one of the 7.
Oh,
so there was
okay.
I mean, it didn't, represent all the people, but they had a panel discussion around a round table, and so they had some discussions with a few more students, like a married couple who were both trying to sort of navigate jobs and do living school and things like that. So.
Did you have to be a member, or did you have to belong to one or the other, or could a day student take an evening class at that time?
The classes were all together, so.
Okay, because I mean later they certainly were, but were they at that time as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I wonder if the placelessness of the films was connected to what Christine's looking at, which was more of this kind of experimental literature, poetry of the late 60s, which was also very closely tied into the Canadian movement, right? Canadianization universities, where you had people like Henry Bicel, who was here, and Robin Matthews. It was really the hotbed of Canadianization. Sir George, there are a number of different events that took place here. And it seemed to me it was very much part and parcel of more of an experimental outlook, maybe trying to get away from, E.M. Forster and the colonial points of reference that one sees in the curriculum. So I think there was perhaps a tension growing among those who weren't really satisfied with the way English was being taught and understood, that perhaps underpinned this movement of change going on in the late 1960s.
I disagree with you at that point. But
Well,
now-
anyway.
There's a question.
There's a question.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any idea of how this might have been received at the time. I don't really know much about the television setup at that time, if there was just a few channels and what time this would have aired and...
Well, he said Sunday morning is what he said on the screen.
They said Sunday morning.
Yeah, and the first
10
one they
a.m.
mentioned
Sunday
Sunday
morning.
morning, yeah.
Okay,
Just
so
when
this
would have
would
aired. I
have
can't
been-
remember what time. Do you remember?
10 a.m.
10 a.m. on Sunday morning.
Instead of church.
Right, that's right, yeah.
Now instead of
Circular,
Coronation Street.
Right. But Christine, did you have any?
I wasn't able to find anything about sort of who was watching or any reaction, unfortunately.
But is there any any additional follow-up? I mean, there were the 7, and then...
Oh, then they moved they had 4 credit courses in the following year for 3 years.
On CBC?
On CBC, sort of, I believe it was the same kind of thing, Sunday morning broadcasts. So 1 year it was Shakespeare, and it was like a full year course, and then the next year economics, and the next year introduction to literature. And then that was 64, 65, and that's when the hall building came up the next year. And then they started experimenting more with kind of in-house productions rather than going through the CBC.
And the whole building at its time
Yeah.
built as a fairly technologically
Yeah, it
state-of-the-art.
was- yeah,
You wouldn't know it now,
totally
but...
wired and-
The elevators didn't work then.
They
They don't work now. Maybe getting newer.
But you were talking about
that's
Taggart
right.
and the language courses, which ran on TV for...
Yeah, they're in, I think it was 68, Mark.
Started in 72 and ran through to 84.
Yeah.
And they went out on the community channel, Channel 9 on cable.
Okay, yeah, so this was a French, I
The
think it was an introductory
French
French course.
It was a 6-credit French course,
Yeah.
ran for 12 years.
Mhm.
And that replaced 10 or 12 sections of 25 students which were being taught in classrooms. So that was replaced, and you could either do it by watching it at home, or you could come in and watch it in the learning labs.
Ah, really? And was it these were, did you say 6 credit courses? Is that what you
6
said?
credit courses, there were 52 half-hour programs. And it was also, it's very innovative. It also had Bell Telephone put together a gizmo with about 8 lines where you could dial up
Yeah,
and do your language lab exercises from home.
right, yeah.
So it was actually a pretty amazing experiment, and
Interactive.
and it was expensive. It was over $50,000 to produce, and that was in 1972. So that's big money.
I think
but-
we've sort of lost the institutional memory of how innovative the hall building was.
It was very
And the
innovative. It
AV
was-
component within the university at that time. The building was built with audiovisual
all wired, yeah.
capacity. It was wired from day one, and that was the intention, and it was state of the art, absolutely bleeding edge, no question about it.
At the Apollo, 1968, the Apollo mission was projected in H110 with a big TV projector.
Wow.
And it was packed, as you can imagine, to the rafters. Live event.
So it looks old-fashioned now, but it wasn't when it was built.
Well, it is.
Any other questions? Any final words from the
I loved seeing it, it was interesting, boring in parts, but interesting to see the hairstyles and the way people talked and the social interactions and the way people dealt with each other. It's always interesting to see those things from the past and sort of judge them from a very different perspective.
And a pretty notably jazzy
Yeah.
music too.
That's right.
77 Sunset Strip.
Right, yeah.
It's, we just kind of watch it fold and unfold and refold, and it becomes in many ways the same entity. That's what I find so fascinating. The evolution is there, and there are so many changes. But the changes, I don't know if they are really so profound as a change in vocabulary,
Yeah.
which of course does point to certain realities. But the social dynamic, the institutional dynamic, and the questions that have not been answered. How do you integrate digital learning in the classroom to this moment? Well, we're going to keep arguing about it. And, we'll maybe get an answer, probably, in a symposium 20 years hence.
I mean, also, it can be seen as Canada's variation of ETV in the US that started earlier. That is, trying to use the airwaves to edify and educate the public about things that were thought to be important. So I thought it was very interesting in that respect. There's a kind of innovative moment where you didn't find, I think, this kind of programming across the board because, well, at that time it was basically just CBC, and it really hadn't embarked on more of this kind of outreach that you found in the programming. And I think also the promise of that being then incorporated into the curricula of universities, making use of television. So it was very experimental. So I think it has to be judged in that light as well. I mean, we can be harshly critical of it, but really they were just starting from scratch, I think, in terms of saying, well, how do you do it? How do you put together a program about education in universities? Well, let's try this,
Yeah.
So I think it's quite commendable that they made this effort, and they actually went out, and it was a mobile branch, so they went out to the community and tried to do this and got together people, and I think they were quite well prepared. They were, they came ready to express themselves, and I thought it was quite well organized in terms of the different aspects of it that were put together. So I think it's unfortunate that maybe more didn't come of that, and that we don't see more of that today that's going on. And I guess you can ask, well, why is that the case? Which is kind of disappointing that it seems like the universities are relatively neglected now, I would say, in terms of media coverage, in terms of what's going on, except when something happens bad. But aside from that, the kind of day-to-day stuff is, I think, is really ignored, I think, to the detriment of the country, right? That not enough people really don't know about it. They don't value it, I think, and I think the media plays a role in that, in the sense of not highlighting it or bringing it to people's attention or to talk about it other than through just cliches. So I thought it was good. They're talking about research, they're talking about education, and the kinds of things I think that are really neglected today, that, you know, you really don't see much discussion of.
Great. Well, listen, thank you, Judith, Nancy, and Bill, Christine. Thank you very much, and thank all of you for coming this afternoon.